Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when the alarm sounded across the UE's Vengeance. He set down his cup and walked quickly to the bridge, where his crew was already moving to their stations. The red lights flashed in the dim corridor as he made his way through the ship he had commanded for 3 years. Lieutenant Ben Hayes looked up from his station when Jake entered the bridge. The young officer had been with the crew since they left Earth orbit, and Jake trusted his judgment completely. Ben's face showed concern as he handed over the datapad with the incoming transmission. Message played through the ship's speakers, and Jake felt his stomach tighten as he listened. The voice was weak and filled with pain. It spoke in the universal language that all spacefaring species used for emergency communications. The words were simple, but the fear behind them was clear to anyone who heard them. Any vessels in range? Please respond. This is the Zilani homeworld, calling for immediate assistance. The Korthic Dominion has broken all treaties and invaded our space. Our cities are burning, and millions of our people are dead. We have no military ships left to defend ourselves. Please help us. Our children are dying. The message ended and then started again from the beginning. It was set to repeat automatically, which meant whoever sent it was probably dead or running for their life. Jake had heard distress calls before, but this one was different. The Zilani were known throughout the galaxy as peaceful people who never hurt anyone. Ben worked at his console to get more information about the signal. His fingers moved quickly over the controls as he traced the source and checked for other ships in the area. After a few minutes, he turned to face his captain with new data. Sir, the signal is coming from the Zilani home system about 6 days away at maximum speed. I'm also picking up responses from other human ships. It looks like we're not the only ones who heard this call for help. Jake nodded and walked to the main viewing screen where a star map showed their current position. The Zilani system was marked in blue, while their own location showed as a green dot. Between them lay empty space that would take almost a week to cross even with their fastest engines. How many human ships are responding, Ben? I count at least 30 so far, sir, and more are checking in every few minutes. Admiral Chun's flagship, the Silent Thunder, is among them. She's ordering all responding vessels to meet at coordinates she's transmitting now. Jake knew Admiral Lisa Chun by reputation. She was one of the most respected officers in the human fleet and had never lost a battle. If she was taking command of this rescue mission, then the Zilani might actually have a chance of survival. The Zilani were strange aliens who could read minds and feel what others were feeling. This made them perfect at stopping fights between different species. For hundreds of years, they had helped make peace when other races wanted to go to war. Every government in the galaxy respected them and asked for their help when problems arose. But the same abilities that made them good at making peace also made them terrible at fighting wars. How could you shoot at an enemy when you could feel their fear and pain as if it was your own? How could you kill someone when their death would hurt you as much as it hurt them? Jake had met Zilani before during diplomatic missions. They were tall and thin with large eyes that seemed to look right through you. When they spoke to humans, they always seemed sad, as if they could feel all the anger and violence that humans carried inside them. But they never judged or tried to change anyone. They just tried to help when they could. Sir, I'm getting new information about the Korthic forces, Ben said as more data came through. Intelligence reports say they have over 200 ships in the Zilani system. That's their entire invasion fleet. The Korthic Dominion was everything the Zilani were not. They were a military empire that had been growing larger and stronger for decades. Their ships were powerful, and their soldiers were trained from birth to fight and conquer. Their leader, War Prime Falcon, had never lost a battle and was known for being completely ruthless. Jake studied the tactical information that Ben was showing him. The numbers did not look good for a rescue mission. Even if every human ship in the sector responded, they would still be badly outnumbered. The Korthik had been planning this invasion for years, and they had chosen their moment carefully. Ben sent a message to Admiral Chun. Tell her the Vengeance is responding, and we'll meet the fleet at the coordinates she provided. Also request current intelligence on Korthik ship positions and defensive strategies. Yes, sir. Should I also inform Earth Command about our change in mission? Jake thought about this for a moment. Earth Command would want detailed reports, and probably orders to be careful about getting involved in alien conflicts. But people were dying right now, and there was no time for bureaucratic delays. Send them a standard notification that we are responding to a distress call. Full reports can wait until after we assess the situation. The bridge crew worked efficiently to change course toward the meeting point. Jake could feel the ship's engines increase power as they turned toward the Zelani system. Around him, his officers prepared for what might be the largest space battle humans had fought in years. Commander Ryan Peters arrived on the bridge a few minutes later. He was Jake's second in command and an expert on alien military tactics. His uniform was perfectly neat as always, and his face showed the serious expression he wore when analyzing difficult problems. Captain, I've been reviewing everything we know about Korthik battle tactics, Ryan said as he handed Jake another datapad. They prefer overwhelming force and direct attacks. They also have no respect for civilian populations and will target cities to break enemy morale. What about their ships, Ryan? How do they compare to ours? Their technology is roughly equal to ours, sir, but they have more ships and more experience with large-scale warfare. They also have no rules about protecting innocent people during battles. That gives them tactical advantages we don't have. Jake nodded as he read through the tactical analysis. The Korthik fought wars the way humans used to fight centuries ago, before they learned to value civilian lives. They would bomb cities from orbit and target refugee ships trying to escape. It was effective, but it was also the kind of warfare that modern humans found disgusting. Sir, we're receiving a fleet-wide transmission from Admiral Chun, Ben announced. She wants all ship captains to listen. The main screen changed to show Admiral Chun standing on the bridge of her flagship. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. Behind her, Jake could see the organized chaos of a warship preparing for battle. Captains, this is Admiral Chun speaking to all ships responding to the Zelani distress call. I want to make our situation clear before we proceed. Intelligence confirms that the Korthik Dominion has invaded Zelani space with over 200 vessels. They are currently bombarding civilian targets and have ignored all diplomatic protests. She paused, and Jake could see other ship captains listening on smaller screens around the edges of the main display. Some looked angry while others appeared worried about the odds they were facing. The Galactic Council has issued strong condemnations of this unprovoked attack, but they have not authorized military intervention. Several other species have offered humanitarian aid, but only after the fighting ends. This means we are on our own if we choose to engage Korthik forces. Admiral Chun's expression became even more serious as she continued. I want every captain to understand that this mission is voluntary. Any ship that wishes to return to previous duties may do so without any questions or consequences. But if you stay with this fleet, you must be prepared to follow orders that may seem strange or even wrong to you. The transmission ended, and Jake looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They were all looking at him, waiting for his decision. He had trained most of these people himself, and he knew they would follow whatever orders he gave them. Ben opened a channel to the fleet. This is Captain Morrison of the U.S. Vengeance. We are staying with the fleet and await further orders from Admiral Chun. One by one other captains made similar announcements. When the count was finished, 47 human ships had committed to the rescue mission. It was the largest human fleet assembled since the border wars. But Jake wondered if it would be enough to save the Zelani people. Fleet began moving toward the Zelani system at maximum speed. Jake knew they had 6 days to plan their attack and figure out how to fight an enemy that outnumbered them more than 4 to 1. He also knew that every hour they spent traveling was another hour that Zelani civilians were dying under Korthic bombardment. The Vengeance settled into formation. With the other ships, Jake walked to his cabin to review the intelligence reports. He had been in space battles before, but never against odds like these. The Korthic were experienced warriors with superior numbers, and no concern for civilian casualties, but humans had something the Korthic did not understand. They had learned to fight not just with weapons and tactics, but with ideas and principles. That made them stronger than the sum of their ships and soldiers. Jake hoped that would be enough to save the Zelani before it was too late. Admiral Lisa Chun stood in the command center of the Silent Thunder, watching the tactical display that showed the Zelani system. Red markers indicated burning cities, while blue dots represented refugee ships trying to escape the bombardment. Her jaw was tight as she watched the destruction unfold in real time. 3 days had passed since the human fleet arrived at the edge of the Zelani system. For 72 hours, they had maintained position and done absolutely nothing while Korthic ships continued their systematic destruction of Zelani civilization. The bridge crew worked quietly around her, but she could feel their confusion, and frustration. Commander Ryan Peters approached her with the latest casualty reports. His face showed the strain of watching innocent people die while their fleet sat motionless. He had served under Admiral Chun for 5 years, but had never seen her give orders like the ones she was following now. Admiral, the Zelani casualties have reached 12 million dead. Their defensive platforms are down to 30% effectiveness, and Korthok ground forces are preparing for planetary assault. Several refugee convoys have been destroyed trying to reach the outer system. Lisa took the report and read through the numbers. Each statistic represented thousands of families torn apart by Korthic weapons, children who would never see their parents again, and cities that had stood for centuries reduced to smoking ruins. The weight of it pressed down on her shoulders. Like a physical force, any word from Earth Command Ryan. Yes, ma'am. They confirm our orders remain unchanged. We are to observe and document, but not engage unless directly threatened. The Galactic Council is still debating a response, and we are not authorized to act independently. The orders made sense from a political standpoint. Humans were still relatively new to galactic politics, and starting a war with the Korthic Dominion could have consequences that lasted for generations. But watching innocent people die while following bureaucratic procedures felt like a betrayal of everything the human fleet was supposed to represent. Captain Sam Johnson's voice came through the communication system from his ship, the Retribution. His report was brief, but carried the weight of a man struggling with impossible orders. Admiral, this is Johnson. We've identified 3 more refugee convoys attempting to escape the inner system. Korthic interceptors are moving to destroy them before they can reach safe distance. Estimated civilian casualties, if we don't intervene, are 50,000 men, women, and children. Lisa closed her eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. When she opened them, her voice was steady and calm, despite the storm of emotions she felt inside. Maintain position, Captain Johnson. Continue monitoring and recording all Korthic activities for the official report. The silence that followed her response lasted several seconds. Finally, Johnson acknowledged the order with a simple "Yes, ma'am" that carried years of military discipline, even as it went against every instinct he possessed as a human being. Lieutenant Kate Morgan worked at her station, tracking Korthic ship movements and their systematic destruction of Zelani infrastructure. She was young and had joined the fleet because she believed humans were the good guys who protected innocent people from bullies like the Korthic. Now she was watching her heroes do nothing while aliens died, Admiral, I'm detecting massive energy. Signatures from the Korthek flagship. They're preparing to demonstrate their new plasma bombardment weapons on the Zalani capital city. Population of that city is approximately 8 million. The tactical display updated to show the Bloodfang moving into position above the largest Zalani population center. War Prime Falcon had been sending taunting messages to the human fleet, for days trying to provoke them into action. This would be his most brutal demonstration yet. Open a channel to the Bloodfang, Lisa ordered. The main screen changed to show the bridge of the Korthek flagship. War Prime Falcon sat in his command chair wearing the black armor that marked him as the supreme military leader of his people. His face showed the cruel satisfaction of a predator who had cornered helpless prey. Admiral Chun, how generous of all. You to finally speak to me. Have you decided to stop hiding behind your treaties and actually do something useful? War Prime Falcon, I am Admiral Lisa, Chun of the Earth Defense Fleet. I am calling to inform you that your actions in this system are being recorded and will be presented to the Galactic Council as evidence of war crimes. Falcon laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. Behind him, his officers prepared the weapons that would kill millions of innocent people in the next few minutes. War Crimes Admiral. The Korthek Dominion does not recognize the authority of the Galactic Council or their arbitrary rules about warfare. We fight to win, and the weak deserve whatever happens to them. Your human fleet can watch and learn how real warriors conduct military operations. The communication ended, and Lisa turned back to the tactical display. The Bloodfang's weapons were charging, and there was nothing she could do to stop what was about to happen. Her orders were clear, and the consequences of disobeying them could start. A galactic war, Admiral Kate called out from her station. The Zalani government is transmitting directly to us on emergency frequencies. The voice that came through the speakers belonged to Ambassador Veilmine Turin, who had spoken for the Zalani people at many diplomatic conferences. Lisa had met him once during peace negotiations and remembered his gentle manner and sincere desire to help others. Admiral Chun, this is Ambassador Turin, speaking for what remains of the Zalani High Council. We know of humanity's reputation for protecting innocent people and fighting against injustice. Our world is dying and our children are being murdered while you watch from safety. Please, if you have any compassion in your hearts, help us before it is too late. The message was being broadcast on open frequencies, which meant the Korthek could hear every word. Falcon was using Zalani desperation as psychological warfare against the human fleet. He wanted them to feel the weight of choosing politics over lives. Ryan Peters looked at his admiral with something approaching desperation in his eyes. Around the bridge, other officers struggled to maintain their composure as they listened to the Zalani plea for help. This was not what any of them had signed up for when they joined the human fleet. Admiral, we could disable their flagship before they complete the bombardment. A precision strike on their weapon systems would save those 8 million civilians without starting a full battle. Lisa understood the temptation and felt it herself. But she also understood something her officers did not yet see. Sometimes the most important battles were fought not with weapons, but with patience and timing. Maintain position, Commander. Continue recording everything that happens here. The Bloodfang fired its plasma weapons, and 8 million Zalani died in less than 30 seconds. The capital city that had stood for over 1,000 years became a crater of molten rock and ash. On the tactical display, the blue marker representing the city simply disappeared. Captain Nathan Moore reported from the Stormbreaker with barely controlled anger in his voice. Admiral, the Zalani resistance cells are requesting immediate military support. They're attempting guerrilla warfare, but their telepathic abilities make killing traumatic for them. They can't sustain casualties the way conventional forces can. The cruel efficiency of the Korthek strategy was becoming clear. They had studied their enemy carefully, and knew exactly how to break Zelani morale. Every death the Zelani resistance caused filled them with their enemy's pain and fear. It was psychological torture designed to make them unable to fight. Negative, Captain Muir. We maintain observation status only. More reports came in throughout the day. Refugee ships destroyed as they fled the system. Resistance fighters surrendering because they could not handle the emotional trauma of combat. Entire cities evacuated and then bombed as the populations tried to escape by. Evening, the human fleet had watched the Korthak kill over 15 million innocent people. The Zelani military was completely destroyed, and their government was preparing to surrender unconditionally. It would be one of the fastest genocides in Galactic. HFY War Prime Thakin transmitted another message to the human fleet as his forces prepared for the final assault on the remaining Zelani cities. Admiral Chun, I hope you and your cowardly fleet have learned something valuable today. This is what happens when weak species try to stand against the strong. Your human reputation for courage and honor appears to have been greatly exaggerated. Perhaps you should return to your home system before you embarrass yourselves further. Lisa turned off the communication without responding. Around her, the bridge. Crew worked in silence, broken only by the quiet sounds of their equipment. She could feel their judgment and disappointment, but she also knew they did not understand what was really happening here. Admiral, Ryan said quietly, the crew is asking questions about our orders. Morale is dropping, and some of the junior officers are questioning whether we're really the good guys anymore. Tell them we are following orders from Earth Command, and our mission is to observe and document Korthak war crimes for presentation to the Galactic Council. Ma'am, with respect, that's not going to be enough. These people joined the fleet to protect innocent civilians, not to watch them die, while we do nothing. Lisa looked around the bridge at the faces of her crew. They were good people who had volunteered to risk their lives defending others. War Prime Thakin stood on the bridge of his flagship, Bloodfang, looking at the tactical display that showed his complete domination of the Zelani system. 2 weeks of systematic destruction had reduced the once peaceful species to scattered survivors, hiding in underground shelters. The human fleet still sat at the edge of the system, doing absolutely nothing. Fleet Commander Gorak approached his leader with the latest intelligence reports. The massive Korthak warrior moved with the confident stride of someone who had never known defeat. His scarred face showed satisfaction as he handed over data about their successful campaign. War Prime, our ground forces have secured 70% of all major Zelani cities. Resistance has collapsed in most areas, and the remaining civilians are surrendering without fighting. Total Zelani casualties now exceed 20 million dead, with 5 million more in detention camps. Thakin studied the numbers with the cold efficiency of a predator, calculating the best way to finish wounded prey. The Zelani had proven even weaker than his intelligence reports had suggested. Their telepathic abilities made them excellent diplomats, but terrible soldiers who could not handle the emotional trauma of warfare. What about the human fleet, Gorak? Have they made any aggressive moves or communications? None, War Prime. They maintain position at the system edge and respond to no communications. Our psychological warfare broadcasts appear to have no effect on them. They simply watch and record our operations. Thakin walked to the main viewing port, where he could see stars scattered across the darkness of space. Somewhere among those distant lights was the human home system with the species that claimed to protect. Innocent people had chosen to abandon the Zelani to their fate. The humans are proving to be exactly what I expected, Gorak. They make loud claims about honor and justice, but when faced with real opposition, they hide behind political trees like cowards. Their reputation for military strength was clearly exaggerated. Fleet Commander Gorak was not entirely convinced by his leaders' assessment. He had studied human military tactics and found them surprisingly effective despite their emotional nature. This passive response seemed inconsistent with documented human behavior patterns. War Prime Our intelligence suggests humans prefer rapid, overwhelming attacks when they choose to fight. This watching strategy does not match their documented tactical preferences. Perhaps they are planning something we do not understand. They are planning nothing, Falcon replied with certainty. Humans are driven by emotion and sentiment. They should have attacked us within hours of arriving if they intended to fight. Instead, they sit motionless while their supposed friends die. This proves they are weak when confronted by superior force. The Korthek commander turned back to the tactical display where red markers showed his ships, positioned around every major Zelani population center. His invasion fleet outnumbered the human force by more than 5 to 1, and his warriors were experienced in planetary conquest operations. Continue the psychological pressure on both the humans and the surviving Zelani. I want broadcasts on all frequencies showing Zelani civilians begging for help that will never come. Let the galaxy see that human promises of protection are worthless when tested. Captain Julie Peterson aboard the human ship Thunderbolt listened to the latest Korthek propaganda broadcast with growing anger. The message was being transmitted on emergency frequencies to ensure maximum psychological impact on anyone monitoring the situation. To all species observing this demonstration of Korthek military superiority, we offer this lesson about the reliability of human protection. The mighty Earth Defense Fleet sits powerless while their supposed allies die by the millions. Do not trust human promises of aid when facing real military threats. The broadcast included video footage of Zelani children in detention camps and destroyed cities where families searched through rubble for missing relatives. War Prime Falcon appeared personally to deliver his message to the watching galaxy. I am War Prime Falcon, Supreme Commander of the Korthek Dominion Military Forces. We have offered the humans multiple opportunities to interfere with our legitimate conquest of Zelani territory. They have chosen the coward's path of observation over the warrior's path of action. Let this be remembered when other species consider seeking human protection. The transmission ended, and Julie turned to her communications officer with barely controlled frustration. Lieutenant Alex Foster had been monitoring Korthek frequencies for days, and his face showed the strain of listening to constant reports of civilian casualties. Captain, the Korthek are preparing for their final offensive against the last Zelani strongholds. Intelligence estimates suggest they will achieve complete victory within 48 hours. After that, the Zelani government will have no choice but to surrender unconditionally. Julie nodded and updated her tactical analysis for transmission to Admiral Chun. The mathematics of the situation were brutally simple. The Korthek had superior numbers and had systematically destroyed all Zelani military capability. The humans could probably delay their victory, but could not prevent it without massive casualties meanwhile. In the underground bunkers beneath Zelani cities, the last organized resistance fighters struggled with an impossible situation. Scout Mind Kira led one of the largest remaining cells, but her telepathic abilities made every combat operation a nightmare of shared pain and fear. Council Leader, we cannot continue these attacks, she reported to the surviving Zelani government leaders hiding in a deep shelter. Every Korthek soldier we kill fills us with their terror and agony. Our fighters are breaking down mentally and can no longer function effectively. The elderly Zelani leader, Wisdom Mind Orel, looked at the young warrior with eyes that held centuries of accumulated sadness. He had lived through the golden age of Zelani civilization when their telepathic gifts were celebrated throughout the galaxy. Now those same gifts were destroying their ability to defend themselves. Scout Mind Kira, our species faces extinction within days. The humans who we believed would save us have abandoned us to our fate. If we cannot fight, then we must prepare for surrender and hope the Korthik will show mercy to our surviving civilians. Kira felt the despair radiating from the council leader, and from the hundreds of other Zilani crowded into the underground shelter. Their telepathic network that had once connected them in harmony now shared only terror and hopelessness as their world burned above them. Wisdom Mind, perhaps the humans, are planning a rescue that we cannot see. Their military tactics are different from ours, and they may be waiting for the right moment to strike. Child, look around you, Aurel replied gently. Our cities are ash, our people are dead, and our enemies grow stronger each day. If the humans intended to help us, they would have acted by now. We must face the truth that we are alone. Above ground, Korthik soldiers moved through the ruins of Zilani cities, collecting intelligence and securing strategic locations. Commander Vakthorn led one of the occupation units and reported regularly to his superiors about the complete collapse of Zilani. Resistance, Fleet Commander, the remaining Zilani fighters have ceased all organized attacks. Our psychological warfare appears to have broken their will to fight. They cannot handle the emotional trauma of causing death even to save their own species. Gorak received the report with satisfaction. The Korthik understanding of Zilani psychology had proven correct. A species that could feel the pain of their enemies was incapable of effective military action. It was a weakness that made conquest almost effortless. Excellent, Commander. Begin. Preparations for the ceremonial surrender. War Prime Falcon wants the Zilani government to formally submit to Korthik authority while the human fleet watches. It will be a powerful demonstration to the galaxy. The planned ceremony would take place on the steps of the last intact Zilani government building. Representatives of the surviving Zilani leadership would publicly surrender their species to Korthik rule, while broadcasts carried the event to every monitoring system in the galaxy. War Prime Falcon reviewed the surrender documents that would officially transfer Zilani territory to the Dominion. The telepathic abilities of the conquered species would be useful for intelligence gathering and psychological warfare against future enemies. They would become valuable tools in the Korthik military machine. Fleet Commander, when the surrender ceremony is complete, I want a personal message transmitted to Admiral Chun. Thank her for providing such an educational demonstration of human military reliability. The galaxy has learned a valuable lesson about trusting human protection. The message would be the final insult to the human fleet that had watched helplessly while an entire civilization died. Falcon expected no response, just as there had been no response to any of his previous taunts and challenges. The humans had proven themselves to be political creatures who valued treaties more than lives, but as the Korthik prepared for their victory celebration, they remained unaware that their systematic destruction of the Zilani had been observed and recorded by more than just human ships. Representatives from dozens of galactic governments had monitored the invasion to see how the newest military power would respond to genocide. The Alterian Republic had sent diplomatic observers who documented every Korthik atrocity for presentation to their government. On the 14th day of the siege, something changed in the formation of the human fleet. It was subtle at first, just a slight adjustment in the spacing between ships and a minor realignment of weapon systems. To most observers monitoring the situation, it appeared to be routine maintenance procedures. Admiral Lisa Chun stood before the main tactical display in her command center, surrounded by her senior staff who had waited 2 weeks for this moment. The bridge crew of the Silent Thunder worked with quiet efficiency as they prepared for operations that would determine the fate of galactic politics for generations to come. Communications prepare for fleet-wide transmission on all frequencies, including emergency civilian channels, Lisa ordered. Her voice carried the calm authority of someone who had planned every detail of what was about to happen. Lieutenant Ben Hayes worked at his station to coordinate the transmission systems of all 47 human ships in the fleet. The synchronized Broadcast would ensure that every receiver in the Zelani system would hear the message that was about to be delivered. Admiral, all ships report, ready for coordinated transmission. We have confirmed receipt capability on Korthik military frequencies Zelani, civilian channels and monitoring systems from 12 different galactic governments. Lisa nodded and walked to the center of the bridge, where cameras would record her. Message for transmission throughout the galaxy. Behind her, the organized activity of her crew created the backdrop of a military force preparing to demonstrate its true capabilities. Fleet-wide transmission now. The communication went out simultaneously from every human ship in the fleet, ensuring that no receiver in the system could avoid hearing the words that would change everything. Lisa's voice was calm and measured as she addressed War Prime Thakin directly. War Prime. Thakin, you have spent 14 days demonstrating to the galaxy what the Korthik Dominion represents. You have shown us your efficiency, your ruthlessness, and your complete disregard for innocent life. You have made your nature perfectly clear to every species monitoring this situation. She paused, and throughout the system every ship, every station, and every emergency receiver waited for her next words. In Korthik Command Center's military, analysts suddenly realized that something fundamental had changed in the tactical situation. Now we will show you ours. The transformation of the human fleet was immediate and absolute. 47 ships that had remained motionless for 2 weeks suddenly accelerated with synchronized precision that sent shock waves through every military expert watching the situation. This was not the emotional charge that Thakin had expected from humans, but something far more dangerous. Captain Jake Morrison aboard the Vengeance felt his ship respond to the coordinated movement orders as the entire fleet advanced toward the Korthik positions. The tactical display showed perfect formation flying that demonstrated months of preparation and training for this exact moment. Tactical, this is the captain. What are you reading from Korthik fleet movements? Lieutenant Kate Morgan worked frantically at her sensors as data flooded in from throughout the system. The Korthik response was exactly what Admiral Chun had predicted, but the speed of their reaction showed they had not expected this level of coordination from the human force. Sir Korthik, fleet is moving to intercept our advance. One count 237 vessels, including 12 dreadnoughts, moving into defensive formation around the inner system. They're positioning to use superior numbers against our approach vector. The mathematics still favored the Korthik by more than 5 to 1, but something had changed in the psychological balance of the engagement. For 2 weeks, they had grown accustomed to human passivity, and the sudden transition to coordinated action caught them off guard. On the bridge of the Bloodfang War Prime, Thakin stared at the tactical display, showing the human advance with something approaching disbelief. These were the same ships that had sat motionless while he destroyed an entire civilization. Now they moved with mechanical precision that suggested careful planning rather than emotional reaction. Fleet Commander, what is our tactical assessment of this human attack? He demanded of Gorak, who was coordinating defensive positions. War Prime, their formation is extremely tight, and they are advancing directly toward our main defensive line. This appears to be a coordinated assault rather than the desperate charge we expected. Our numerical advantage remains, but their tactical precision is concerning. Thakin felt the first stirring of uncertainty he had experienced since the campaign began. Human military doctrine emphasized overwhelming force applied quickly, but this measured advance suggested something different. They were not acting like desperate rescuers, but like hunters who had found their prey. First engagement occurred at the outer edge of the asteroid belt, where a Korthak patrol squadron encountered the human advance force. 8 Korthik destroyers moved to intercept 3 human cruisers in what should have been a routine skirmish to test enemy capabilities. Captain Morrison's Vengeance led the human formation, with 2 support ships maintaining perfect spacing behind him. The Korthik commanders expected a fierce battle between roughly equal forces, but what happened next defied all their tactical expectations. Human ships did not open fire with maximum weaponry, as Korthik doctrine would have demanded. Instead, they used precise surgical strikes that disabled Korthik engines and weapon systems, while leaving life support and emergency systems completely intact. Within minutes, 8 Korthik destroyers were drifting helplessly, but with their crews unharmed. This is Captain Morrison to disabled Korthik vessels. You are now prisoners of war under human military regulations. Medical assistance will be provided for any injured crew members, and your survival is guaranteed. Prepare to receive humanitarian aid teams. The transmission was heard throughout the system and represented something unprecedented in Korthik military experience. No enemy had ever offered medical aid to captured forces or guaranteed the safety of prisoners. It was a concept so foreign to their understanding of warfare that many Korthik commanders assumed it was some form of psychological trick. Fleet Commander Gorak reported to his commander with growing confusion about human tactical methods. War Prime, the humans appear to be deliberately avoiding lethal force while completely neutralizing our military capability. This is not consistent with any known form of warfare. It is weakness, Thakin replied, but his voice lacked its usual certainty. They lacked the stomach for real combat and tried to compensate with precision weapons. We will show them that mercy is a luxury that superior numbers can overcome. But as the battle progressed, it became clear that human precision was not a sign of weakness, but of overwhelming technological and tactical superiority. Each engagement followed the same pattern, with Korthik ships systematically disabled while their crews remained unharmed. Psychological impact on Korthik forces was devastating. Warriors who had been trained from birth to expect death in battle found themselves helpless but alive, while their enemies provided medical care to wounded prisoners. It challenged every assumption they held about warfare, and military honor. Captain Julie Peterson reported from the Thunderbolt as her task force engaged Korthik heavy cruisers near the third planet. Admiral Chun, this is Peterson. We have successfully neutralized 6 enemy vessels with 0 casualties on either side. Korthik crews are requesting clarification about human intentions regarding prisoner treatment. Inform them that all prisoners will be treated according to human military regulations and will be repatriated after the conflict ends, Lisa replied. Also inform them that medical care is being provided regardless of species or military affiliation. The concept of repatriation was as foreign to Korthik understanding as medical care for enemies. In their military tradition, captured enemies were either enslaved or executed, depending on their potential usefulness. The idea that prisoners would be returned home after the war ended was incomprehensible. Prime Thakin watched his tactical display with growing alarm as red markers representing his ships changed to yellow, indicating disabled but intact vessels. The human advance continued with mechanical precision, while his forces found themselves systematically neutralized without being destroyed. Gorak ordered all remaining ships to concentrate firepower on individual human vessels. If we cannot match their precision, we will use superior numbers to overwhelm their defenses. The concentrated assault began with 12 Korthik dreadnoughts focusing their weapons on the Silent Thunder in an attempt to demonstrate that human ships could be destroyed despite their tactical advantages. The massive energy discharge should have been sufficient to eliminate any single vessel, but the human flagship's defensive systems absorbed the attack while her escort vessels provided covering fire that disabled 3 of the attacking dreadnoughts. Admiral Chun's ship emerged from the bombardment with minimal damage, while her attackers found their weapons offline and their engines dead. This is Admiral Chun to War Prime Thakin. Your aggressive actions against clearly superior forces are putting your crews at unnecessary risk. I recommend immediate surrender to prevent further casualties among your personnel. The offer of surrender terms was broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that every Korthic crew member could hear their enemy offering to spare their lives. The Battle of Zelani Prime ended exactly 6 hours after it began. When the final Korthic ship was disabled and its crew taken into protective custody, the galaxy had witnessed something unprecedented in military history. An entire invasion fleet had been neutralized with 0 casualties on either side, and systematic medical care provided to all captured personnel were prime. Falcon found himself in the detention facility aboard the Silent Thunder facing Admiral Lisa Chun across a simple metal table. For the first time in his military career, he was genuinely confused rather than angry about his defeat. The psychological impact of human tactics had shattered assumptions he had held his entire life. "You could have destroyed every ship in my fleet," he said quietly. "Your weapons and coordination were superior to anything we possessed. Yet you chose to disable rather than kill. I do not understand this strategy." Admiral Chun leaned back in her chair and studied the defeated Korthak commander with the analytical gaze of someone who had planned every detail of this conversation. Behind her, through the observation port, Falcon could see human medical ships providing aid to his wounded warriors. "War Prime, the question is not whether we could have destroyed your fleet, but whether doing so would have served our objectives. Tell me what you learned during the 2 weeks we remained inactive." Falcon considered the question carefully. His military training had taught him to analyze enemy tactics and motivations, but human behavior seemed to follow rules he did not understand. "I learned that humans are unpredictable and do not respond to standard provocation. You allowed us to complete our invasion and destroy Zelani resistance without any military response. This suggested either cowardice or political restraint. And what do you think every other government in the galaxy learned while watching our apparent inaction?" The implications began to dawn on Falcon as he realized the scope of what had actually occurred. The human fleet had not simply been following political orders during those 2 weeks. They had been conducting psychological warfare on a galactic scale. "They learned to underestimate human military commitment," he said slowly. "Every species monitoring this situation saw your fleet do nothing while civilians died. They concluded that human protection was unreliable when tested by superior force." Admiral Chun nodded and activated a holographic display showing fleet positions throughout the galaxy. Dozens of alien governments had repositioned their forces based on the assumption that humans would not honor military commitments when faced with overwhelming opposition. For 14 days, every military analyst in known space watched the mighty Earth defense fleet sit motionless while genocide occurred. They saw us as political creatures who valued treaties more than lives. They learned to dismiss human military power as a threat to be taken seriously. She stood and walked to the observation port where disabled Korthic ships were receiving humanitarian aid from human vessels. Medical teams worked alongside former enemies to treat wounded prisoners with the same care they would provide to their own personnel. But they also learned something else, War Prime. When we finally chose to act, we did not simply win a military engagement. We demonstrated absolute tactical superiority while showing mercy to defeated enemies. We proved that human strength is not measured by our ability to destroy, but by our choice not to. Lieutenant Ben Hayes entered the room with a communication pad containing messages from throughout the galaxy. The young officer's face showed amazement. At the diplomatic revolution that was occurring in response to the battle, Admiral, the Galactic Council is requesting an emergency session to discuss new defense protocols. 17 different species have submitted formal requests for mutual defense agreements with humanity. The Alterian Republic wants to negotiate immediate military cooperation treaties. The transformation in galactic politics was exactly what Admiral Chun had planned during those 2 weeks of apparent inaction. Every government that had dismissed human reliability was now scrambling to secure protection from the species that had just redefined modern warfare. What specific terms are being requested, Ben? Most of them want guarantees of protection against military aggression in exchange for agreeing to what they're calling the Zelani Accords. New protocols for civilian protection during conflicts, including prohibition of orbital bombardment and targeting of refugee ships. Falcon looked up sharply at the mention of the new accords. You are using our invasion as leverage to change galactic military law. We are using your demonstration of Korthic military methods to establish standards that will prevent future genocides, Admiral Chun corrected. Every species that wants human protection must agree to specific rules about civilian populations during warfare. She turned back to face the captured War Prime with an expression that mixed professional respect with moral certainty about the righteousness of her cause. Your trial will be conducted publicly under human law, but with observers from the Galactic Council. Your crews will serve sentences proportional to their individual crimes and will be repatriated when their terms are completed. The Korthic Dominion will pay reparations to surviving Zelani and must sign the accords to avoid continued human intervention. Concept of proportional justice was as foreign to Korthic culture as medical care for enemies. Their legal system recognized only victory or defeat, with the winners taking everything and the losers facing slavery or death. The idea that individual actions carried individual consequences was revolutionary. Why are you explaining this to me, Admiral Chun? Because you will be returned to your people, eventually, War Prime. When that happens, you will tell them exactly what you learned during this campaign. You will explain that human military power is not based on our ability to destroy enemies, but on our choice to show mercy while demonstrating overwhelming superiority. Admiral Chun walked toward the door, but paused to deliver her final point about the strategic implications of the battle they had just fought. The galaxy needed to understand that human strength comes not from anger or hatred, but from careful planning and controlled application of force. We do not fight because we are emotional. We fight because we choose to, and when we choose to engage, we do so according to our principles rather than yours. 6 months later, the Zelani homeworld was being rebuilt under human protection, with construction teams from dozens of species contributing to the restoration effort. The telepathic aliens had survived near extinction and were slowly learning to trust that their protectors would honor their commitments. Korthic Dominion had become the first major military power to voluntarily sign the Zelani Accords after their government concluded that continued conflict with humans would result in the systematic dismantling of their entire military structure. War Prime Falcon had been sentenced to 20 years of community service, helping rebuild Zelani City's 12 other species had signed formal defense agreements with humanity and the Earth Defense Fleet found itself serving as the de facto peacekeeping force for a significant portion of the galaxy. The 2 weeks of apparent inaction had established human reliability more effectively than centuries of military victories could have accomplished. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Vengeance as his ship patrolled the restored Zelani system. The peaceful aliens had resumed their role as galactic mediators, but now they worked under the protection of human weapons and human principles of warfare. Captain were receiving a transmission from the Zelani Council expressing gratitude for our continued protection, reported Lieutenant Alex Foster from the communications station. Jake nodded and looked out at the stars where human ships maintained their vigilant patrol. The galaxy had learned to respect human military power, not because of their ability to destroy enemies, but because of their willingness to show mercy while demonstrating overwhelming force. Military academies throughout known space now taught courses on the Battle of Zelani Prime as an example of strategic patience and controlled application of superior technology. The concept that apparent weakness could be calculated strength had revolutionized military thinking among dozens of species admiral. Chun's gamble had succeeded beyond her most optimistic projections. By allowing the galaxy to underestimate human resolve and then demonstrating precise, overwhelming force applied with mercy, she had established new standards for interstellar conflict that protected civilian populations while ensuring human military supremacy. The Zilani had been saved not by immediate intervention, but by careful strategic planning that transformed their near extinction into a catalyst for galactic political revolution. The species that could feel the emotions of others had learned that sometimes the greatest kindness required temporary apparent cruelty in service of larger justice. As the rebuilt Zilani cities sparkled with new construction and former enemies worked together under human supervision, the galaxy settled into a new era of peace, enforced not by fear of destruction, but by respect for controlled power applied according to moral principles. Human fleet had proven that the loudest message could indeed be delivered in perfect silence, followed by overwhelming force, applied with precision, mercy, and unwavering commitment to protecting innocent life, regardless of species or political affiliation.